Hi everyone and happy Friday. My name is Cam and welcome to Spar&Brawl. I'm one half of your hosting duo. I'm joined by Sam Danishvar, my good friend and opponent on this show. Sam, how's your week been?
Great, thanks. I hope we can bring a different perspective to the news.
Yeah, so let's tell the folks what this show is really about. So it's a casual weekly news show where we're gonna just go over a handful of news stories that were either really big and we couldn't ignore, or maybe some smaller stories that we found interesting. Does that sound about right to you, Sam?
Yeah, exactly. I think the thing that makes us a bit different is the international perspective. Probably we're gonna bring to the news. We're probably not gonna focus on any nation's specific, politics, and more on the international geopolitics of it all.
That's so true. That's so true. So hopefully we're going to be covering stories from all over the world. And so for our first episode, for the first week, we're going to look at the Israel UAE, the historic Israel UAE deal that was struck by the two countries on Thursday. We're going to look at the Iran-China deal from a few weeks ago. What else? We're going to look at some coronavirus stories regarding vaccines, regarding resurgence of cases in some European countries. What else do we have today, Sam?
Well, I think we're going to take a brief look at the Beirut explosion and its consequences on the region and the Lebanon as a whole, as well as the VP pick by the Democratic candidate in
Oh,
the
yeah,
U.S.
US
elections.
elections.
That's
That's
going to
gonna
be
be,
a, I
I
think,
think,
big
big
deal
deal
that
that
we
we
have
have
to
to
discuss
discuss
in
in depth,
depth,
Oh,
probably.
definitely okay. And I also forgot about the South Sudanese story that we're gonna look at. Unfortunately,
Okay, sorry.
127 some civilians, other army members lost their life in a clash in South Sudan this week, so we'll also be looking at that story. But okay, so without further ado, let's get into our first story, and that is yesterday, President Trump on Thursday announced that Israel and the United Arab Emirates have come to a deal, and it's called a historic deal, which really seems to have two parts to it, although I'm not too sold on the second part of it, and that is the first part, which is the normalization of relations between UAE and Israel. This is only the third country that Israel now has an official agreement with. The other two countries are
The
Egypt.
third Arab
Sorry,
country.
third Arab country. Sorry, yes, third Arab country. The other two are Israel, are Jordan and Egypt. So this story, as I mentioned, the first part is that the normalization. The second part of this whole deal is, and this has really been promoted more by the UAE side, which is there's apparently going to be at least a pause or a stopping or cessation of the annexation of West Bank. Now, this is the part that I find much more interesting. So I wanted to read one or two quotes before asking you about the story, Sam. So just the first quote that I wanted to read was from Netanyahu. So this one is after in a televised event once the deal had been announced by President Trump. He said that there is no change to my plan to extend sovereignty, our sovereignty in Judah and Samaria, which are the historic names of the West Bank, in full coordination with the United States. So no change to my plan to extend sovereignty there. So it's already putting a lot of, just a few hours after the announcement was made, he already started putting some doubts into what this really means, stopping the annexation of the West Bank. But on the other side, from the UAE, Sheikh Mohammed bin Zayed, who is known as MBZ, he's the crown prince of Abu Dhabi. He said that an agreement was reached to stop further Israeli annexation of Palestinian territories. So I mean, it
So
always.
the,
Sorry.
the first, can you read the first quote again? The Israeli.
Yes, from Netanyahu, he says, really, the first part of the quote is the most important. It says, "There's no change to my plan to extend sovereignty."
So what maybe he means he doesn't plan to extend Israeli sovereignty.
But I mean, I don't see
Or no.
why that would be the interpretation. I mean, I find it to be vague as well. And he says in full coordination with the United States. So
Or
what
what's your
what
what's your general take? Do you think it's a
Well, I think that really I think the whole part about stopping the annexation of West Bank, I think this is going to blow over in a week or two. It's going to be forgotten, and this deal will really come down to the normalization of the relationship between the UAE and Israel, which pretty much means much more official trading, exchanges, diplomatic work, agreements, business and that. But what it really means for the Palestinians and West Bank, I mean, right now I'm really not sold that it's going to be much, and it's probably going to be forgotten soon, and the increase in settlements will resume and trying to annex as much territory as possible from there, keeping the capital in Jerusalem. And I mean, there are no talks about that, allowing Israel to have its capital in Jerusalem. So I don't really see that there's going to be anything. I don't believe that there's going to be anything too consequential on that side. What do you think that this deal means and doesn't mean?
Well, I pretty much, I think I largely agree with you. It was quite interesting. I watched a program about it, which was a Persian language program, but it was quite interesting because within Iran there are quite a variety of different views about the issue. We'll put the link down below, but it's a 60-minute discussion program by BBC Persia,
Does it have any
basically.
subtitles in English or is it just in Farsi?
I No, I don't think so. I don't think they. No, I doubt they have subtitles in English. But it would be quite. I think it would be quite good if somebody did that. It would be, I think, useful for even non-Persian speakers. Uh, one of the first surprising thing was that it was announced by U.S., not by Israel or UAE. So I think one or two of the people who were in that program were arguing that it this has more to do with the U.S. elections and Donald Trump needing a policy win. And
100%. I mean, he finally had something to show no matter what you think about it. And he announced it, and it's a quote unquote deal. So, I mean, he must be a happy chap, at least for a few
yeah,
hours.
exactly. Well, to be honest, that's the thing. It was they argued, at least two of them argued that considering that the whole deal of the century and the all of that turned out to be pretty much nothing. Palestinians boycotted the talks and um, pretty much nothing happened out there. This seems to be the basically the end result of all the efforts that the Trump administration has been putting into fixing the Israeli-Arab conflict. And another aspect is that it is pretty much known by everybody that UAE, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, they've been having, high-level relations with Israel for a very long time now, at least 2 decades. So it was something that would have happened, I think, sooner or later. It's just made it, I guess it's becoming more official. It's becoming more open. But the relationship was pretty good, I think, even beforehand.
I think the past few years it definitely got much better. I think a decade or so ago, maybe they had less relationship, especially the UAE. But now I think, I mean, yeah, exactly. The past few years, I actually wanted to look because I recall that the UAE didn't allow Israeli passport holders into the country at least a decade ago, and I was looking up if that is still the case. And even about a year ago, so already in 2019, they were saying that Israelis could come for Dubai was supposed to host Expo 2020.
Hmm.
So I mean, it was even going
Sure.
to that extent, and of course doing business and trade and all of that is probably it's just going to be more official. It's going
Oh,
to be continuing to
probably the most important aspect is the strategic and security cooperation, which they probably have at the moment. So, it was, in a way, it was not surprising, uh, but the sudden announcement, the fact that Trump administration announced it, was quite a surprise. And to be honest, I don't know. I don't. In a way, I'm disappointed because it does seem to have distracted from the failures of the, because at the beginning of the Trump administrations, everybody was promised the historic deal between, Israel and Arab
I
countries or
mean,
Israel and Palestine. So none of that came about, but the relations with a single nation got normalized. That seems to have been the
yeah,
end result.
which was on its way there. I mean, when Jared Kushner revealed his economic plan, or because it got even downgraded to just an economic plan, right? So that
Yeah,
was even
yeah.
that was the final thing that they show. I think that lasted in the news for a day or so, and I think that only has to do because it was just the
I
biggest
mean,
joke ever. I
yeah.
mean, nobody had anything to say about it.
I do understand in from I mean I think it will become clear during the show that we may have certain slightly leftist tendencies, but at the same time though I do understand that Israel has won the war pretty much on the ground, so it's extremely hard. I don't understand how could US even. I mean, this administration is ridiculous. They've just taken the Israeli side, but I can't really see anybody stopping the Israeli side, even if they tried in an honest and genuine way. So, in this program, which I should give credit to, and the link will be in the box below, hopefully, we had all kinds of opinions, and one of them, which was by Ali Reza Nourizad, who's a journalist and a writer, he was very positive about the UAE and Israeli deal. He thought it can be a first step towards, East Jerusalem becoming the Palestinian capital.
But it's all
Which I am.
speculation, right? I mean, it's all speculation on his behalf. It's like an optimistic speculation.
Yeah, yeah. But that, I mean, everything at this point is
Yeah.
a speculation. But yeah, you're right. I agree. I think it was very optimistic. But the other two people on the, on the panel, they were very, well, they were, very negative about it as, not negative about it, but they thought it wouldn't really change anything significantly. And like us, they thought it was a natural. UAE and Israel already had relations, so it did make sense in many ways. And they emphasized that it's really a hail mary by the Trump election campaign. It doesn't really change anything geopolitically in the region.
No, definitely. I mean, I would be surprised if anything concrete comes out of it because already it's been denounced by everybody on the other side. And I mean, yeah,
Yeah, I don't know if you heard, Iran and Turkey, they both described it as a betrayal and a stab in the back.
yeah.
So, and one aspect which was quite surprising, if you have been following the news, during the last year, UAE has been really making independent maneuvers, like, you know, dealing with Iran at a very high level, independent from Riyadh, obviously, from Saudi Arabia. And they started an independent policy in Yemen, in Persian Gulf. So it was surprising to me, like not surprised, but it is interesting that UAE seems to be independent yet is still in the Israeli-US camp. Nobody knows what's going
No, I
on.
think there are still. I mean, clearly there, the UAE, Saudi, Israel, and the U.S. in their own camp. But I think you can say that UAE is definitely growing to a certain level and extent now that even in Yemen, although they're on the side with of Saudi, they don't do everything that Saudi say, and I believe they are pursuing different objectives themselves in Yemen and are funding different forces. So I think just they've grown to the point where they can also just follow their own lead at a time and they don't need to do everything with the Saudis.
Well, that's one argument. To be honest, the argument the one of the panelists made, which I quite liked, was I'm not sure about this. I haven't done research about it, but he argued that and unlike Saudi Arabia, UAE is not a pure like absolutist monarchy, or it's the powers of Mohammed bin I forget his name, Mohammed bin Zayed, I think.
Oh
Who's the
yeah, I
prime
think so.
minister?
Yeah,
Right. Yeah.
the
He's
president and ruler of the UAE.
Uh, well, there is the president, there is the prime minister. It's basically seven different rulers of seven different. So what they were arguing was that, and UAE is far closer to Iran, so it's far more vulnerable compared to Saudi Arabia in case of any hot conflict. So they were arguing that maybe that's the reason, because from what we know, the UAE's prime minister was actually in certain things was more aggressive than Mohammed bin Salman in regards to Iran in from the leaks the, before in the beginning of the Trump administration. So it's quite interesting. It seems in UAE, within UAE, there is quite a lot of differing opinions compared to Saudi Arabia, at least.
Interesting. But I mean, yeah, but I'm pretty sure. I mean, it is the ruler of Abu Dhabi, and I guess maybe with his foreign minister. But I mean, they deal with all of the UAE's foreign affairs, and I mean, they have control over much of the country. So I don't know, even if there are differences of opinion within the UAE. I mean, I don't.
No, I mean, I think they are far more. They have to basically answer to more people in a more serious way than Mohammed bin Salman has to. You know, it's I mean, it's all it's all a spectrum. It's all different degrees of you in Middle East. We are just talking about different degrees of, I guess, dictatorship. But yeah, so I think maybe there is more pressure on them to, be more diplomatic. Maybe there is more divides, people acting in completely independently. Some of them trying to deal with Iran, some of them trying to deal with US. But it seems situation is quite interesting there.
I mean, not that this last deal actually that undermines what I'm going to say, but I do agree with one thing that you said. I think then we can transition to the second story, and that is that UAE probably does fear more than Saudi of ever escalating with Iran to a point where there's some kind of attack on their territory, which is of course so close to Iran. It's a tiny country. It could have huge ramifications for their tourism and all kinds of business.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, tourism is the main worry is the oil and gas fields, but yeah. No, generally speaking, it seems. I mean, Qatar has always been the one that's been closer to Iran in terms of economic cooperation and all that. But UAE is also quite, it seems UAE has never completely, you know, throw the baby out with the bathwater in
Yeah,
case of
definitely not to the extent of the Saudis. I mean,
no, yeah.
yes, for sure. But okay, so let's transition to our second story, and that's the Iran and China deal. So that happened a few weeks ago. Do you want to refresh our memory about that deal and then take it from there?
Sure. As it was widely reported both in Iran and abroad, China and Iran came to an understanding, and they basically have signed the first draft of a deal that would lead to a strategic cooperation, which would include probably the most important of all, a Chinese investment of 400 billion in inside Iran's economy over the next 25 years. So it won't be a immediate investment. There is quite actually interesting. We put the links out below. There are quite a few interesting articles that break down the deal in details. I think within the I think about 200 billion of it should be invested in Iran or in Iranian partner projects within the next like 10 years, which is quite, it's a very, very ambitious investment if true. In exchange, Iran will probably give oil and petroleum-based products to China. It provides them with oil and petroleum-based products to China, obviously at a discounted rate, at a cheaper rate. Apparently, about 20% discount they're thinking about for the foreseeable future. So it is quite, in some ways it can be described as a very important deal, depend with this big caveat, which is that still has to, pass all the legal hoops in Iran and in China, you know, and probably this passing of it through the Iranian parliament will probably, cause some headaches or may lead to some
Now that
changes.
you're saying that, let me ask you a question. Sorry for interrupting you. So Iran is having its elections when? In March?
In its presidential
Yeah.
elections or parliamentary
Oh, true. It's
elections?
having its parliamentary elections this year and presidential.
No, no. They already had the parliamentary election, and the new parliament was just sworn in about a month ago.
So they have the presidential election soon.
President, about a year from now.
Oh, about a year
About
from now. Okay. So I mean,
Yeah,
because one thing that I read is that President Rouhani, Iran's president, wants to have. So now, if the deal with the U.S., the nuclear deal, is, let's say they can't really, it's really out of the window, and next year they can't bring it back. They say that one reason that he wanted to make a deal with the Chinese is to have something to show for his 2 terms. Right now, he's completed 2 or 1, 2 terms.
two.
Do you think there's any value behind that, or is it even politically risky to do this? So that wouldn't even make sense.
No, no, I think it would definitely make sense. I don't think that was the crucial factor or important factor. I think the crucial factor was China offering the deal, to be honest. That was because the economic situation in Iran and the lack of funds and the fact that they are isolated, they can't get their money
But I heard
already.
that Trump facilitated. Did you hear that?
Facilitated the deal?
He gave them both tips. He gave the
Oh, yeah.
Chinese and the Iranian golden negotiation tips. He sent them a copy of his book.
I'm sure everybody read the art of the deal before signing.
They're like, okay, okay, all right. I think we
Well,
got
he
this.
hasn't actually written, but ghost written this. Yeah, I'm sure he played it. I mean, I think he definitely plays an inspirational role for everybody around the world. So yeah,
Everybody making deals out there. Shout out to
yeah,
Trump.
yeah, exactly. But the deal is, it's a very fascinating and big deal from many different aspects. But the deal can be actually seen as a part of the famous Chinese initiative, the Belt and Road Initiative, the new Silk Road or whatever they want to call it. And it would basically Iran would become the major energy provider for the Chinese industrial growth, global industrial growth.
But I mean,
But
what I found super interesting, though, now that you say this, is that Saudi Arabia is still the number one seller by far of oil. I mean, they actually broke new records apparently in May for the amount of oil that they sold to the Chinese.
oh yeah, well the Saudis are trying very hard to get the Iranian and Russian markets, which traditionally China was a customer of Iran and Russia. So yeah, I mean that's what caused the collapse of the oil prices during the last 6 months ago. Was it 6 months ago, a year ago? It feel After coronavirus, it feels like so long ago. But before Corona, we already had the collapse of the oil prices to negative, right? That was partially because of this competition among the states. But let me give you some details about the deal, some controversial details. So the major detail is the $400 billion investment. The controversial details are, well, first non-controversial detail is that there is going to be major railroad projects connecting Iran to Central Asia and Iran to Pakistan, and some within Iran and connecting Iran to Afghanistan. And there is going to be Chinese presence in Iranian ports in the Persian Gulf, and that's been a controversial, and many Western articles, like in America, they highlighted this point. And there is a possibility of a presence of Chinese troops of about 5,000 in Iran for protection of their assets. It's a possibility at this point. It's not for sure, but that's been controversial within Iran. And there is from the people who've read the deal in details, the not the deal, the draft that has been leaked basically, and there is apparently it's not just about Chinese investment in Iran, but a promise of a strategic partnership investments in, for example, in places like Iraq and Syria. So that could be quite interesting. So some people see that as China using Iran's expertise to increase its role in the Middle East.
I see. So
But these
joint
are,
kind of joint investment projects in third countries.
yeah, exactly. Yeah. So yeah, I don't know what's your take on this. What do you see? There's, as some people argue, do you see it as a Chinese takeover of Iran or just a strategic partnership?
I mean, it sounds very typical Chinese. You know, if you think about it these days, they like to make bilateral agreements with countries, with all kinds of countries in Africa, other places in the world, just playing with everybody as much as possible, buying oil from the Saudis, striking deals with the Iranians, being close to Israel, doing as much as possible and extending the Belt and Road Initiative. And you're right, it probably sounds like it links to that too, to a certain extent. So it sounds very much like a typical deals that China has been making with other countries. And I mean, and from Iran's point of view, it was just, to me, it seems like a no-brainer. I mean, you're completely frozen out of the international market, of dealing with the world's biggest economy, of dealing making with the US, which makes it hard for them to also deal with the EU. So I mean, besides the Chinese, they have nowhere else to turn and to look. So I mean, I thought, to me, it just made complete complete sense. None of these things I find them to be too much problematic. I mean, the part with the forces and stuff. I mean, China doesn't. I don't know to what extent, if that will be what, if they have troops to, you know, exactly, if it's to look after some of their investments, or to what extent. I mean, the reason that it's controversial in Iran is because it's against the constitution or something like that, right? To have foreign forces on Iranian territory. Am I right in any
Uh,
way there?
I'm not sure. I think it comes down to interpretation probably because it's probably foreign. I don't know if it's. I don't know. I have to look into the. I have to look into the text exactly. But the Iranian constitution is not exact. Has not stopped the government from doing anything so far. So, yeah, yeah. I mean, I think Iranian nationalism, I think, is the major. That's why people don't like it too much. But I just don't think 5,000 troops are that like they don't put the security in jeopardy. I don't think. I don't know.
In no way. What I mean, I don't think so either. So I mean, now what's gonna come to fruition from this deal? Now that's a different question.
Yeah, yeah. I would let me give you an internal perspective as well, though, like an internal from the about the internal dynamics. Quite quite interestingly, um, you know, as a result of the falling apart of the US-Iran deal and this deal, obviously the part of the the politicians who were more in favor of dealing with the West are obviously getting battered though. Even though Rouhani is the one who signed this deal, a lot of people still criticize him for being late about it, and they should have been more welcoming to China's overtures before and all that. At the same time, you had the very conservative people criticizing the deal because of the reasons I mentioned before. So while the deal, I mean, from Iranian, as you said, it seems like a no-brainer, still the opinions were quite divided.
Yeah, I can see that. But I mean,
Yeah.
sometimes these opinions are, I'm talking about opinions in general, they're like ideological. So regardless of what's in the deal, you know, they'll
Oh
be
yeah,
like,
yeah.
oh, don't make a deal with China, or for God knows what reason.
And to be honest, I have a feeling conservatives were happy to uh, criticize Rouhani for like the the problems of this deal, but if they were in his positions, they would have like they were happy that he signed it. Actually, he got the the shitstorm basically for it. But overall, what other aspects? I don't know. Oh, have you seen any coverage of this deal in Western papers? What were they saying?
Initially, I mean, I can't say that I've been reading this actively. I mean, at first, I just saw it in the Western media as it was announced like, everywhere else. I heard a little bit about the controversies that you were saying from Iran, but I haven't read or seen anything too interesting from here. And I mean, I don't from the US or European outlets. Haven't seen anything specific. And
I would say that in my experience, all the major articles I read in New York Times and a couple of other places, foreign policy analysis, they were way too more optimistic about the deal than Iranians and Chinese, I think, are. You know, they may use it in their political speeches to say, no, it's a fantastic deal. It's gonna do this. It's gonna do that. But I do think they were exaggerating in foreign, like in American media, of the level of importance this has, and they were making a bigger deal of it than it is. And there is a very interesting interview with one of the Iranian diplomats on RT. We put the link below again. And in that, it's quite interesting. He, as he's an acting politician, right? He's very careful. He keeps trying to say that this is about Iran and China. The the host keeps saying that, oh, is this about America? Is this you guys, hitting back against American hegemony and uh, their sanctions and blah blah blah? And the Iranian diplomat is very careful and constantly says, no, this has nothing to do with America. We have a separate and independent relation with China going back many years, and we deal with America at a later point, or whenever we deal with America, whatever. So Iran is basically is not trying to probably pit China against America. Although I think that one of the reason why the timing of this deal is it happened now is because Iran is thinking that Joe Biden will win the U.S. elections, and when Joe Biden is gonna possibly come back to the Iran U.S. deal, or try to at least make some overtures towards the Iranian regime, then they'll have something to trade. That's my thinking, because that goes back towards the old Iranian foreign policy, which I think they called it tawazuneh or something. It's called balance, basically trying to balance one foreign power with another foreign power.
I see. So, yeah, I mean, yeah, but I mean, it is definitely helpful in that sense too. But I'm guessing if Biden comes back into power, he'll probably just out of spite of Trump try to put the deal back where it was more or less.
I'm not 100% sure. I mean, that would be the bare minimum from the view of Iranians, but at the same time, I'm not so sure because you have quite a lot of few neocons within the Joe Biden administration, and they've been saying a lot of, oh, Iran also has made a lot of mistakes. We should do that. We should do this. I don't know. Maybe this is just so they open up. They have enough space for maneuver. Maybe they don't want to say that, oh, we're gonna go back. They don't want to admit that they gonna do that right now. But at the same
But
time,
they're gonna have to do something. Like they're gonna do something about the deal, though. I think.
oh, for sure, or about Iran for sure. Yeah, at least I think they're gonna probably lift some of the sanctions on the third countries. Like Japan, and stuff. That's been one aspect. Oh, and another very interesting aspect about this deal, which I didn't see coming at all, was that it has affected Iran's relations with other countries.
Yeah, I was gonna ask you about that. About towards India, I believe. I think India wasn't too happy about it, right?
No, not at all, because India was the country that was like the companies from India was supposed to help to build the railroads in southeast Iran, which is a very strategic point, especially from the Indian point of view, because India wants access to Afghanistan uh, without going through Pakistan. Pakistan is a big ally of China already, and now Iran is becoming a big ally of China and probably getting closer to Pakistan. And they cut them out of the railroad deal. They cut them out of a gas exploration deal in the Persian Gulf or Sea of Oman. I'm not sure. And yes, yes, and it was quite I mean, I watched quite a lot because India, thankfully, because there's a lot of English speakers, they do produce a lot of English content, and it was quite interesting on YouTube. There were quite a lot of Indian channels. Some of them were very negative, like saying, "Oh, Iran just signed its death warrant with this deal. China is gonna, betray Iran or whatever." And some were more like, "Oh, India lost a good opportunity." And some were, to be honest, I think we're quite balanced. That India tried, but because of U.S. Sanctions and U.S. pressures, it couldn't basically do anything. And they pointed out, which I didn't know at that time, that apparently India is increasing its relations with Israel and certain Sunni majority Arab states. So maybe India is basically shifting more towards the Saudi Israeli camp as a whole, and that maybe also be an extra reason why Iran pushed them out so fast. But it's not just limited to India, though. Their relations with South Korea has soured very significantly. Yeah, yeah, Iran has threatened to bring legal action against South Korea because they haven't paid them for oil money, and they've been dragging their feet about the whole, setting up a special corridor for finances and all that. So this China deal, the immediate effect, at least it seems, the immediate effect is Iran getting bolder in the international sphere and demanding more from other partners.
Okay, so now having mentioned the US a few times, let's go visit the US a bit with Joe Biden, who has now officially announced that Kamala Harris will be his vice president. She is the senator from California. I believe she's in her first term, and she is famous for being the Attorney General of California, I believe, from 2011 to 2017. So she will be Joe Biden's vice president if Joe Biden ends up winning the November election. So, Sam, from Joe Biden's point of view, from his campaign's point of view, why do you think they picked Kamala Harris? What do you think are her? What does she bring to the table? But really, just put yourself in their shoe for a second. Would you have picked her, or would you have picked somebody different?
Oh, well, that's a tough question. If I agreed with their policies and their
Yeah, I mean, you
positions,
were literally in their
yeah,
position right now. You know, you were Joe Biden, or
I,
you were his campaign
I,
manager.
mm, I mean, probably I would. Actually, maybe no. Maybe I would have gone with Stacey Abrams or Gretchen Miller. To be honest, Stacey Abrams would have been my choice because uh, let's discuss why they chose Kamala Harris, and then I'll tell you exactly why I would have chosen Stacey Abrams instead. Probably, but I think it would have been a better choice electorally. But I would add this caveat at the beginning, though. I don't think VP choice matters that much. Uh, not in the. I don't mean it actually might matter a lot this time around because Joe Biden seems to be suffering from certain health issues. But in election wise, I don't think it's a big like. It's not something that's gonna win you the election, or It's not gonna be something that loses you the election. It might help you a bit, you know.
Yeah, 100%. That's also, I think, I think the work has just been done for the Biden administration. It just really doesn't have much to do with what he picks, what he does, who he picks. I mean, some people always vote Democrats, some people always vote Republican. So that's out of the way. And I think the hate that some people have developed for Trump, and the fact that Biden is not as hated as Hillary, that's just gonna decide those quote unquote swing votes, and that's
Well,
pretty much what the election is gonna come down to, I think.
no, I don't necessarily actually agree with that. I think I don't think, I think the hate of Trump is mostly a media thing. I think coronavirus and the economic response is what really crushed uh, Trump administration's chances, really. And unless there is a terrorist attack or something, yeah, I think, yeah, that's the thing. But I think they um, let's talk about the choice of the VP, right? I think the Biden campaign, they feel like they're in a very strong position. They're in a very comfortable position. So, and from very beginning, they said they're gonna choose a female for the VP, a slot. So that was given. But then you had the George Floyd protest, and until George Floyd protest, the front runner for VP pick was.
Um, One of the two people that you mentioned. No, sorry, it was Klobuchar, no?
Yeah, it was Amy Klobuchar, right? So it was Amy Klobuchar till then, but then we have the George Floyd protest, and her estate is basically, it's not something you want to be associated with anymore, right? And then she goes and gives an interview. Some describe this interview as basically as a, way of getting rid of Elizabeth Warren, right? That she says that I think it's time for a woman of color or someone of color to become the
I
VP.
remember that, and he
Right.
really put Elizabeth Warren in the spot. Okay, now you
Yeah,
have to come
exactly.
out and say the same thing.
Yeah, exactly. And then I guess at that point there weren't that many choices left for the Biden campaign. They could have gone with Warren, but I don't think she would have added that much because, I mean, besides the fact that she hasn't won her own state even, I think the hatred for her on the left is quite
Exactly.
strong now. I mean,
But
the left,
now that you
seeing.
say this, I just want to say one thing to push back against when you said that the hate for Trump is very much the media. I mean, I do agree that it's very much fueled by the media, but I think some sectors in the left, especially those that are saying vote for Biden no matter what, and forget about any kind of other alternative or Green Party or not voting or anything like that. I think that's just the part of the hate that's going
Oh yeah,
towards Biden. But I
sure.
mean, it's
So,
yeah,
and I would agree that even that would probably cover the suburban people in America to an extent, significant numbers of them. But I don't think it's a, they are not big enough to win elections or lose elections.
so the economic issues. Okay, so I mean, you do agree that some people would vote Republican and Trump no matter what, right?
They vote Trump no matter what, or
Yeah.
they vote blue no matter what.
No, that they vote red and Trump no matter what.
Oh yeah, definitely.
So I mean, I don't. Even though the economy is in shambles, maybe that won't affect them that much. But I think one thing that's really making it bad for Trump, the fact that the economy is bad, not that it's the fact that it's bad is true, but also like now he doesn't have. That was one of his arguments. At least before, he would be like, look, employment is going up, stock prices are up. I mean, stocks are still going up, but employment and the rest of the economy. But now he's lost that argument too, to at least make it towards some of these people who aren't sure. So it's really one thing. I think it's really stripped him of that argument completely. Like coronavirus completely removed talking about the economy out of the equation for him.
No,
And I
yeah, I
think he's
guess.
run out of talking points. I don't know what is his talking point right now. I mean, I don't know. With Hillary Clinton and the past election, he had so many things towards so many people, attack lines, attack lines. He calls Joe Biden as a lefty. I mean, I don't think anybody buys that.
No, I mean, look. First of all, I would say maybe saying coronavirus is wrong. The response to
Yeah,
coronavirus
the
was
response.
so. But yeah, he's. I don't think he has any good arguments left. I think before coronavirus, actually, he was my favorite at least to win the election. I thought he would do much better against Biden.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I thought he was gonna exactly. I mean, he would be confident. He getting into a lot of debates with him and discussions. But now,
No, yeah, now he seems I mean, his strategy seems to be pivoting towards the social issues, and you know, uh, yeah, basically, again, racism and immigration and all of that, which I don't think would be enough this time around. I really don't think it would be enough, but who knows? But yeah, I just find it very unlikely that he'd be able to sell Joe Biden as a massive lefty. And I mean, he would have actually a better chance on focusing on Biden being corrupt like Hillary Clinton. But again, I don't think people hate Joe Biden as much.
I mean, I think that one, yeah, he tried. But I mean, you just reminded me of that corruption story. I completely forgot about that. I think that Ukraine story is pretty dead.
Yeah, yeah, I agree. I mean, I think it's a fantastic story to be honest, and it's quite interesting. But yeah, it doesn't have the same catchiness as the Clinton. I guess the Clinton family had such a long background in limelight, and stuff. Joe Biden just doesn't have that.
And Trump
Uh,
hadn't done anything yet, so you couldn't say no, you messed up. He hadn't done anything yet. It was his first time. You couldn't blame anything in the American politics on him.
yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah. And yeah, I think but that's why the VP choice is really you know, but the reason why I wouldn't have chosen Kamala Harris would have been the fact that she has a very, I mean, I disagree with her almost on everything, but she has a very public record of being a very, 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 uh, I don't know how to say, very strong, very hardcore attorney general, prosecuting minorities significantly, d- preventing people from accessing uh, DNA samples and that type of thing to avoid jail time, people being on death row. She tried to stop them from accessing evidence and all that. So I don't know, in the times of George Floyd protest and all that, is she the one you want to
But
be
they're
associated?
completely whitewashing all that away. I mean, if you read about the stuff that they're saying about her right now, it doesn't correspond at all to the narrative about her when she was a Democratic nominee. Now they've forgotten. They're like, okay, forget about the general attorney time and all that. Let's focus on the senator. And I don't know, she's attached her name to like a couple of bills or something.
Yeah, she did. I think she was one of the co-signatories to on the Medicare for All. But now she's gone back a bit. Now she's backing off Medicare for All
Yeah,
now.
exactly. I was surprised of hearing that because I don't remember her talking about I mean, I don't remember her supporting Medicare for all when she was a Democratic nominee.
I mean, it seems like it's a century ago, but about a year ago, before coronavirus and all that, Medicare for all progressive policies seem to be on the winning side within U.S. politics. So you had a lot of people who were basically from the Hillary Clinton side of the Democratic Party, from the corporate side. They were signing up for Medicare for at least
At the very beginning of the Democratic um, race, I
right.
think.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
At
for
the very
sure.
beginning of the Democratic race, that's true. But after that,
Yeah,
but yeah, I
but
mean, go ahead.
that's the reason, though, just in terms of the politics of it, not in terms of uh, policy or anything. But in terms of politics, she might be a bit dangerous in those terms. Uh, I would have gone with the Stacey Abrams because she's also African American. She seems to be very loyal. She doesn't really have much of a track record, I think, before becoming a governor. So, I would have gone with her just in terms of it's a more of a clean slate.
Yeah, but I mean,
But
who's gonna accuse her of all these things? What is Trump gonna come and say? Oh, you're tough on crime and all that. I mean, that goes against what he could say. So they can't even really be attacked.
no, but I mean,
But that
I
is
don't
so
know.
true. They're
Maybe
not gonna
from
win any lefties with picking her.
Huh?
They're not gonna pick any leftists that were out there
No,
that.
no, no. I'm just saying maybe Stacey Abrams, she's not a leftist. She's equally probably as in maybe I don't know.
Maybe
To
she
be
has
honest,
more
she's as much
brand
a
name,
forward.
yeah. But I mean, overall, I agree with what you're saying that it pretty much
But
doesn't
what?
matter. I think I would have picked her too. She doesn't come with. She comes with a little bit of trouble, not much trouble. She's not gonna win any states. Neither of all those other people are gonna win. Again, I think the election will come down to Biden and all the people who vote Democrat, all the people who vote Republican, and then just the hate towards Trump and the economy, like you were saying, because of the response from coronavirus. And these people who want, yeah, all kinds of people on the left who want at any cost to get Trump out of the office. So yeah, I
But,
think it comes.
what do they call them? Never
Never
Trumpers.
Trumpers. Well, okay, Sam, let's
I,
move to the.
I
Yeah.
would give that to Kamala Harris, though. The feeling I get that is that she's a big fight. I don't believe in what she fights for, but I do think she's a big fighter. So we might have a second Dick Cheney on our hand.
Yeah.
I don't think. I think she's a strong personality. It's hard to sideline her at least.
That would be interesting. It would be interesting to see what specific like big roles Trump is gonna give. I mean, sorry, Biden would give to her. If he would give like any specific things to her, I don't know what that would be, but
Biden administration in terms of makeup is going to be really because it's going to be one of those administration. The president is probably not going to be as important as the treasury secretary or a state secretary. So it's going to
I
be
mean, do
quite
they have a
a
good basement in the White
huh?
House? Do they have a good basement in the White House for him to hang out? He's
Yeah,
so used to
they
it now.
have
He's like,
bunker.
I don't want the room upstairs. I'm used to basement now.
Just guys, we work here.
I'll build the basement. Yeah, let's just keep on doing this. I like this basement. I got a little man cave down there now.
I mean, it's technically I think it's called a bunker,
Yeah.
but just an anti-nuclear bunker. But yeah, so it's gonna be quite. Yeah, I hope at the least we can get to some interesting infighting and VP plotting behind the state secretary's back and a state secretary plotting behind the defense minister. So
I think Netflix
that's
is
the
already
least I'm
working on
hoping.
that show.
Huh?
Netflix is already working on that show.
Yeah, hopefully.
That's for
Hopefully.
sure.
Yeah. All right. So I think yeah,
Yeah.
that's about it.
Continue. Please take us to the Beirut and give
Oh,
us some latest on Beirut explosion, please.
all right. Our next story is the Beirut story, and it was a tough story to get an angle on because, in short, it's just basically an explosion happening in Lebanon. But and a lot of people sadly passed away and got injured. But I was watching the news and the coverage, and the situation has deteriorated. Obviously, there were protests, then government resigned, and now there is a state of emergency. Pretty much. Uh, Many countries have offered support. Iran, France, but everybody offered support. But the support coming from the West is difficult because of the sanctions against the Lebanese government, because of Hezbollah and all that. So the thing that I noticed in the discussion I watched, which we put the links below in the box and a couple of places, was that the major question out of this event is largely how did Lebanon get to this point? How did it get to this point? And like there were a lot of discussions I read online and in this program. A lot of people argue that you can this mismanagement traces its roots back to 1982 and Hezbollah becoming a political force in Lebanon. A lot of people blame constant pressure from Israel and American international community. And a lot of other people, whom I agree with mostly, is they argue that the major issue is the political settlement following the French colonial exit, which basically says that the president has to be a Christian the prime minister has to be a Sunni, and the speaker of the parliament has to be a Shia. And this system has led to such a sectarian and such a fragmented country that corruption and all that has run wild and has led to uh, events like this, which is a product of mismanagement, of corruption, of even if, by the way, even if some of the conspiracy theories are true, and some agent from Israel or from Hezbollah or from whoever, Syria, whatever, they caused this explosion in one way or another. I think you cannot deny that it was made possible because of the mismanagement, because of the storage, because of the lack of
Yeah, but I mean, I don't
regulatory
even see why
body.
you would give credit to such a random conspiracy.
No, no, because they are very popular right now. I would say
I
majority
mean,
of
just
Lebanese.
because.
Hmm?
Yeah, I mean, just because they're popular.
No, they should be mentioned, of course, but even if you do believe in such conspiracy theories, you can't deny that it was made possible because of mismanagement. Not, if there was a proper monitoring system, if there was a, proper, if it was an effective regulatory body, this couldn't have happened. So yeah, that these seems to be the different take. The consequence of the explosion seems to be the continued collapse of Lebanon as a state. But there are all these different arguments of who's responsible. Is it Hezbollah, Israel, the situation? I don't know, where do you land on the whole thing? What was your take?
Yeah, I mean, it just sounds like it's such an unfortunate event that, in a way, I mean, it makes sense if there's such wide mismanagement of the economy. I mean, Lebanon was having strikes over the economy. There were protests going on around the economy. So it makes complete sense that this mismanagement has spread to all kinds of different areas of society, and then such dangerous, really, products and material were left in a warehouse for years and years and years without anybody taking proper accountability. So it's just another one of those such unfortunate incidents that then you're like, wow, it makes sense. It apparently woke up some Iraqi officials. I read the story where they started going around, and I mean, pretty much surveying places where they realized that shit, something similar could happen. So they've gone around to clean up some warehouses and other places where dangerous material could have been stockpiled. But yeah, and then the blame, I think it lands on every single level. You start with the local governments, you go up to the national government of Lebanon, and then of course you place it into the world context and the positions that it's been put in, the economic situation there. So I think the blame goes really everywhere, but of course with the officials in Lebanon, because I mean, no matter how much trouble you're having from the outside world, I mean, there's no government telling you, okay, don't clear this up from the warehouses and leave this here. So you can't. So I think the Lebanese government has to take a lot of the blame when it comes to this incident.
Look, sure, I agree to a point, because there was a program. I think I can't remember if it was Channel 4 or BBC, but they were covering the explosion within, it was next few days of it, right? And they had this politician from Lebanon, and then they had this journalist activist of Lebanese, I think, origins, um, and they were discussing the issue. And she was saying that all the blame lies with the Lebanese government, with the corrupt officials, with the powerful elite, and then the politician, the Lebanese politician, were saying, okay, yeah, sure, there's some of the blame lays with the politicians and all that, but the people also are very much to blame, because the people have also, whenever they benefited from this sectarian system, that when Shias get something over Sunnis, they celebrate. When Sunnis get something from Shias, they celebrate. So they have enabled this corrupt system. It's not like this corrupt system. Lebanon, according to even international bodies, they had they had free elections. According to even international bodies, they had free elections. So I don't think you can just blame a political class And oh, the poor people. I'm sorry, but the people were also very much involved in electing those politicians.
I mean, I don't want to speak specifically of the Lebanese context, but any context in general, because I wouldn't know that much about their politics. Everywhere, I mean, everywhere, I think you can put not that much blame on people given the information that is shared with them at all times, given the options, given the circumstance that they're in. So maybe a little victory for them. They're like, forget about the rest. I mean, Lebanon is a tiny country with just 4 or 5 million people, but poverty has reached sky high levels. That's why there were protests this year about the economy. So I mean, I think putting the blame on the public, I'm always wary of this, and I always, based on the things that come out of media, the things that people hear in life, I'm just not surprised when people make such decisions anywhere in the world. And I think with something like this, especially, most of the blame I think really lies on the politicians and the government running Lebanon right now.
Well, I don't know. I think, to be honest, I don't think. I think maybe Lebanese officials, some of them are slightly more to blame, but I don't think it's by much compared to the people, because I think, and I just think Lebanese political settlement is it doesn't allow for effective government. It allows for three very weak factions fighting. It doesn't allow for a strong government, so you can't expect much from the government either. I agree, people are, they shouldn't
That
be
is so true. So I
blamed.
mean, what would you expect of such a system?
Yeah, exactly. But the thing again is, I think people are, again, people should also take some responsibility for, especially when there are free elections, and they still
Well, free
elect corrupt
elections to what
politicians, and they,
extent and between who and in what circumstances and what information and
I'm sorry, but in this day and age, if you can't, anyways, that's my point. But the other thing I was going, so what do you think of a lot of people in Western media and in Iran, a lot of places, they blame Hezbollah. They say that Hezbollah's ineffective mismanagement and blah blah, and the fact that because of them there are sanctions. Uh, that's the main reason why Lebanon is in its situation right. Yeah. What do you think? Do
I
you
mean,
think
yeah,
Hezbollah bears is more of
sanctions never help. Of course, I think most of the time they make the situation worse for the people from that country. And Hezbollah is one part of the government, as you've been saying. Of course, it falls on them, but also the other parties and also the external forces. That there might be a million things wrong with Hezbollah, but just like in any other area, their criticisms are often not genuine. There's a million things that you could say about Trump, but they go and find the weirdest things and try to impeach him on something small, and they're unable to. Why? Because everything else can come back to them as well. You can be like, okay, don't you do the same thing? So I think it's the same story here, really.
Makes sense. No, I agree. I largely agree. Although I would say, I think, if you look at the protests in Lebanon, most of the protests seem to be aimed at mismanagement of economy and corruption, and they seem to be targeting everybody, not just Hezbollah or Sunnis or Christians or anybody. So I do think it's probably a bigger issue. Um, yeah, but it was a sad event that, further pushed the country into a chaos.
Yeah, it's a tragedy. And it just, yeah, I was actually telling you the other day how this year we've had a few different kind of tragedies, like this one, like the coronavirus, that's slightly different than the ones we often used to see on TV, which had to do with terrorism and were more, how can you say it, were done on purpose and to a larger extent than this
Yeah,
one.
I mean, I look, I don't want to say I don't know about this event. I'm still, like, I think still needs to be an investigation about this
Definitely.
event. Maybe there were, saboteurs or whatever. Maybe. But yeah, I think the trend has shifted from human inflicted pain towards nature inflicted pain.
Or to unintentional human. I think it's still
Yeah,
human, the source, and now it's just a bit more unintentional.
yeah, it's like if you die from smoking, you still
Yeah,
died by your own hands, but it's
yeah.
not a suicide. Yeah.
Thing with mastering all ways of bringing harm. So, all right, I don't have much else to add to this story, really. Do you have any other points, or should we go to some of our smaller stories that we have? The next story that we have for today is on South Sudan. Unfortunately, in South Sudan, during a disarmament practice, so where civilians and other factions were returning their guns, there ended up being a confrontation between the South Sudanese army, known as the South Sudan People's Defense Force, and some of the civilians, and this fighting broke out to nearby villages, and other people joined in the fighting. So at the end, there were over 120 casualties. If I'm not mistaken, according to Al Jazeera, 82 of them were civilians and 45 were soldiers. So this disarmament that was going on was part of a peace agreement. So Lebanon, and so sorry, South Sudan, for some of you if you're not familiar, it is the world's youngest country. It got independence from Sudan only in 2011, if I'm not mistaken. So it's a country on the it's an East Central African country. And since then, they've pretty much been a civil war going on in South Sudan. And in February or March of this year, they signed a new peace agreement. So the peace agreement was signed between the South Sudanese president Salva Kiir and opposition leader Riek Machar. So this was signed in February after many months of negotiations. And I guess this disarmament practice or measure event was part of this peace accord, which ended up into a very bloody event. So I mean, South Sudan is a country of just 11.5 million people and has had a civil war since its inception, pretty much since 2011, 2012. So out of the 11.5 million people, the UN estimates that 7.5 million of them need one form or another of humanitarian assistance or protection. Out of the 7.5 million, 50% are women and 50% are children. So the women, some of them are children and some are the adults. So I mean, it is really a country that's in a dire situation. And this news, I mean, I only got it because I have a South Sudan alert on my phone from Google. So if not, I'm not sure if it kind of made any of the mainstream media. Sam, do you ever see, or do you see South Sudan often in the media? I mean, the only place, and it is a big humanitarian, I mean, it's one of the UN's main, one of the countries where the UN is most active in terms of providing humanitarian aid. But unless I'm looking at Al Jazeera or some other channels that cover humanitarian affairs, you rarely hear about Sudan. It doesn't seem to be too important for Western media. What do you think?
No, from what I didn't hear the news you discussed. I didn't hear about that. I don't hear a lot about. I mean, I remember during their like when they were becoming independent, there was some coverage about the civil war and the history of it and all that. But no, not much. From what I recall, if I'm not mistaken, Sudan is oil rich though, and or they have some oil.
Yeah, but then
So
again, I don't know if Sudan is the one that has oil or if it's South Sudan or if
no, no,
it's both of
this
them.
is before. That's the thing. This is
Yeah.
before. From what I understood, North Sudan is richer than South Sudan, but the most of the oil was apparently on the border between the two. Like the way they drew the borders was quite controversial.
Interesting. Maybe this is something we need to dive a bit deeper in next time. Look at the oil.
Yeah.
I didn't hear much about that dynamic. I don't know.
No, I haven't heard much since the separation or anything. But yeah, I guess it's one of those countries that at the moment is not regarded as high priority by the media.
No, definitely. So I
So,
mean,
the question was the conflict with a specific tribe or a specific group of people from a a specific religion or anything, or
No, I mean at least in the story, I mean I'm not sure. I'm sure there are like so many fractions that were part of the civil war. I mean, it just mentioned the name of the town where they were near that this happened, and then they just said that bystanders from villages nearby joined. But at least in the Al Jazeera articles that I was reading, there were two. The first article was from 2 or 3 days ago, where it said there have been 70 casualties, and now it's been moved to 127 killed. But yeah, I don't know, no details like that. If there was a specific reason why everything suddenly went wrong and pretty much a battle erupted.
all right, yeah, maybe we'll follow this up in a
Yeah,
bit
no,
more detail
definitely.
next time. But yeah, that's a shame. Yeah, I mean, unless your country usually has a natural resources that is extremely precious, or or it starts attacking neighboring countries. Unless you do one of these things, media doesn't really cover you. So that seems to be always the case.
No, definitely. So speaking of media, actually, wow, we're transitioning very well. So what is this? You were telling me that the BBC is changing, the UK government is changing the head of the BBC?
Oh, well, I mean, I told you exactly like that, but that's probably not very accurate. The BBC is run by, I believe, run by a director general. He acts like as an editor in chief, let's say, of BBC, and but that director general is elected by a board, and the chairman of the board is apparently up for up for a change. Like they have to change it, and it's all. I think it's. I'm not sure exactly about the pro. This is another thing we have to follow next week. I'm not exactly sure about the election process. I couldn't find a lot of detailed articles about it, but I think it's at least it's recommended by the government. I'm not sure. It might be appointed by the government. It might be just as simple as appointment. But I think at least it's recommended by the government, and then the other people have to say okay, and then it is who it is. But sadly, the options that the sources, it's not nothing is official, are talking about. Two of the options are ex-Tory ministers, Tory is conservative, ex-conservative ministers, and one of them is Andrew Neil, who you may know, and some of his videos have gone viral on YouTube. He did Politics Today or something like that on BBC. It was a political show, but I mean, I must say, as his capacity as a BBC journalist, I never really could tell, like if he's very different from others. But looking into his background, he's quite conservative. He's been an editor of a conservative newspaper magazine in the UK, and it's a shame. It's really because BBC, in my view, is still one of the better media outlets out there, and they seem to at least follow certain rules that they put down. Even I would say within the UK politics, I would say they're even fairer than Guardian, which is supposedly the lefty outlet, and they don't do smear jobs like a lot of other companies. I hope this is not a step towards a more right-wing BBC or anything.
I mean, the
But
UK media environment is crazy. I mean, the whole concept of tabloids is nuts.
yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, it's I don't know. I think France is similar.
Yeah, maybe, but the US is not like that. I mean, you can at least you can give the US that they don't really have news tabloids.
What do you mean? Like gossip about celebrities and
No, it's just in the UK, the tabloids are very much interested in gossip on politicians, and I guess in the US, newspapers are also interested in gossip, maybe on politicians, but a bit less. It's not that much. There's not that high of a level of obsession and trying to pin people against another when it comes in this gossipy term, I find.
I would agree. I think it's the same level, but in UK they are far more. I don't know how they're far more gruesome about it. I don't
Yeah,
know.
yeah, I think that's
It's
or
just the
personal.
language.
Is that the
Huh?
difference, or yeah, is it that they're more personal about it, or
So let's just, so you generally think UK media is more, they pit, they are more aggressive about the gossiping about politicians.
yeah, at the individual level it seems, and at the person level they just seem to be more vicious.
Yeah, that's a good. I think they are definitely more vicious. I don't think there is less coverage or anything, but they're definitely more vicious. But yeah, UK is just quite a strange place in terms of like it's quite surprising. They have quite a strong slander and that type of law. You know, you could sue newspapers and get a lot of money and all that. But yeah, you're right. They're very, very vicious. They are
And
very.
just the
I
concept of
mean,
a tabloid newspaper that doesn't really exist in the States.
really,
No, does
I
it?
don't know. I guess the Hello magazines and all the
Yeah, exactly. You see,
celebrity
like Hello
gossips.
Magazine is really a magazine, you
In,
know?
yeah, entertainment weekly
Yeah.
like television program cover that. But yeah, but I would still say they are not half as vicious as the
Yeah,
British.
and they're nice most of the time in those.
Yeah, half of it. They build you up to bring you down, like. But yeah, I definitely. But yeah, it's a shame about. I mean, this is something we have to again follow up on in future weeks. But I just hope nothing is certain now. It's all some sources. It's not even officially announced. But I just hope BBC at least remained for what it is. I don't think it's quite impartial, but I think it's as close as we have in the world right now.
No, I mean, out of the international mainstream channels, it definitely beats CNN and who else? Well, I mean,
Oh,
CNN. I like Al Jazeera too. I mean, I like Al Jazeera largely to the variety of its stories. So sometimes, like I'm seeing like this South Sudan story, they will actually cover it on on their broadcast a lot of the time too, or what's going on in the DRC or in the Central African Republic. So I enjoyed that part of Al Jazeera a bit, which BBC also does. It also covers at least things from around the world.
I think Al Jazeera probably has more of a focus on Africa and Middle
Yeah,
East,
that's for
and
sure.
BBC might be a bit more Mid-Atlantic.
But CNN, not only is, for instance, their coverage terrible,
Awful.
but they also just like it's as if you're watching the same play just with a different cast every hour, and they just go over the same thing over and over and over again, just with a different cast.
I would say you should check out DW and
Yeah,
France 24. Those two are also good.
no,
DW
definitely.
is what I
Yeah,
like.
they're good for at least getting an overall, getting the stories of the day.
Yeah, I mean, I think CNN and I don't know what's what other English speaking. CNN, Fox News, all of
Or
them
like
are terrible.
Sky. Yeah.
Sky, to be honest, Sky, it's not half as good as BBC, but it's it's better than CNN. It's
And
better.
it's funny. It looks like they're low budget or something. What's going on Sky?
I think it's Fox News bright color. Some people like that. I don't like it, but I don't think they're low budget. It's just they're very a lot of glass buildings, and you can see the outside, and there are no bricks or
I
anything.
don't know. I
So
find
maybe
it strange. But
I
yeah, we'll
don't
have
know.
to keep an eye, I guess, and see if the BBC goes in any different direction or not. And
And
yeah,
same. Yeah. But and generally speaking, the British government, even Labour governments, I think they are not big fans of BBC. They keep cutting its budget. They interfere. So it's another basically chip against BBC's independence, which is not a good sign. And I haven't seen anybody pretty much cover that except we hopefully put the link below. Except Novaro Media, which is an independent left-wing media based in London. They are the only people I tried to do a bit of research. I didn't spend too much time, but I kept trying to do research, and I couldn't even find articles or anything about it. So hopefully it's something that goes away. Maybe.
all right. So the last story we're going to do today, we're just going to talk about coronavirus a little bit. We're going to be mindful of the time. So we're just going to try and keep it structured. So I'm going to try to not go in too many directions. I just wanted to talk about vaccines for like a minute or two, and then I'll pass it on to you and you share some thoughts on coronavirus, and then we'll just take it from there, see if there's anything more to discuss about this topic. So, I mean, it's just one thing that caught my attention this week was really about how the whole announcement by Russia about the vaccine was received. And of course, some of the blame should also be put on how Russia made the announcement. But as far as I've seen, that okay, this vaccine has not gone through the phase 3 trial, what they call phase 3 trial, which is when it's pretty much tested on a big sample of population, 10, 20, 30,000 people, hopefully way more, to see, hey, does this vaccine work or not? And they have yet to complete that. But then again, the announcement made it seem like, they're going to start vaccinating everybody next week. And then Duterte came out from the Philippines saying that they want vaccine from Russia. But at least I know from the Philippines, they're being very clear. In the Philippines, only in October, they're going to start testing the Russian vaccine. So testing is only going to start. And Duterte, their president, is only saying that hopefully in May they're going to start distributing this vaccine. So I think, although it was correct, it's so true what the WHO and what Western politicians and the media were saying, that this vaccine hasn't gone through a phase 3 trial. So it's definitely, we're not sure if it's safe or it works. But I think that argument only holds if Russia starts giving it out to its entire population next week. But apparently they're gonna start also testing it. So I think this news had a lot to do with the way it was presented. Because the funny thing is, if they already started producing this vaccine, but then they're gonna wait for at least some results to come in, I'm sure they're gonna try to speed up this trial as much as possible to get this vaccine out. No doubt there. But as long as there's at least some phase 3 trial going on, it's going to be pretty much the same thing as the US. The US is also has launched its Operation Warp Speed, which pretty much its objective is to have 300 million doses of vaccines ready by the end of January 2021. So the US is also starting producing vaccines without the phase 3 trials to be completed. And just today I read that the EU has put in is ordered 200 million doses of vaccine from Johnson and Johnson, and their vaccine is not finished too. And so I believe they're going to start producing it for it to be ready. So pretty much all these countries everywhere, they're doing the same thing. They're taking a huge financial gamble, which is producing vaccines before they're ready, before that they've been tested. So hopefully if the tests come in, if the correct results come in, then they're ready to go. So I'm sure the Russians, just like the Americans, everybody's going to rush it so much. But that's just like one thing that I felt was just left out of the story. If the Russians did start, like I said, vaccinating everybody tomorrow, then okay. But to me, from what I'm gathering and from the Philippines, that is just really, they're going to start trials, and they're probably going to start mass producing it, just like how the US is doing and probably other countries. So once they get the green light, they're good to go. But yeah, did you have any thoughts about the whole vaccine stories that came out this week?
Uh, no, I mean, it's become a political, issue, so everybody uses it to get a political win. But the only thing I would add, the article I read, and I read it on Guardian, so it may have mistakes in it, was that they were immediately going to give the vaccine to the frontline workers like teachers and government employees. I'm not sure if this was part of the phase 3 testing or if this was basically giving it out to everyone. But yeah, I think if it's better to take every precaution. What to be honest, I think this is all just political, a speech, and we did it first. Who no, they did it first. They did it right. We did it right. I think the major issue we're gonna face is the fact that vaccines may not solve our problem, at least not for a significant period of time. So I think may even backfire. this whole, we are the first vaccine producer. It may even backfire.
That's
If
one thing that's very risky. Fauci, who has pretty much been at the forefront of the U.S. response to coronavirus, he was speaking at a podcast and I was listening to him, and he was also highlighting, okay, I mean, everything about vaccines, about them being safe and effective. Being safe is one thing, of course, you don't want terrible adverse effects, but the other one is, if it's not actually effective, not only will people go out thinking that they're protected, whether it's protected for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, for how long they're protected, for how many months or years, and on top of that, they could lose complete trust in the government if it isn't the case. And it's funny with the coronavirus vaccine, so far you're hearing about some saying you need 1 or 2 doses and you'll be protected for a year or two or longer. But apparently it's one of those kinds of vaccines and diseases that you will not get total immunity from it. Like they already know that, and they will only know after the phase 3 trials how long these vaccines will actually be effective.
But they will only know after, they have time to see basically how long it is. But from what I've heard, it's 2 or 3 months, man. That's as long as they can, not even 2 or 3 years. It's be very, and I don't, I mean, there was again, another really good news probably source is YouTube show called Useful Idiots. They did a great interview with scientist called Robert Gallo, and he made some. We hopefully put the link below, and he made some really good points about the fact that it's very rare to find a vaccine that gives immunity for your whole life. It's not just corona; it's just rare in terms of viruses. So I'm quite, I think this is all just, political
Yeah.
or
But
posturing.
now that you said this, remind me of one positive thing. Those who don't want to say bad things. One positive thing I heard though is that the coronavirus doesn't mutate that much, and apparently the flu actually mutated much more. So that's one positive thing, that the virus is not going to keep on mutating into different strains every year or as frequently as the flu apparently.
Uh, Yeah, I read that, but I read that, but I don't think that's necessarily good news though, because apparently when they mutate, usually they mutate towards less fatal,
Interesting. I
virus.
didn't hear that.
Yeah, because if you kill your host, then you have less chance of, you know what I mean? Like the strains that are generally weaker have more chances of spreading because they don't kill their host.
Interesting. I didn't hear about that. I didn't know that they will necessarily get weaker or something. So
But generally, I'm very, by the way, uncomfortable talking about
yeah.
any of this because I'm
No,
not.
no, I mean we're both saying
But
things we've
yeah,
heard. We're highlighting how these are things that we've.
exactly. But the Russian thing, in my view, was a political, propaganda piece or whatever you want to call it. But at the same time, it was covered as usual in the West in a way that, how can we make Russia look bad?
I don't know. In
So,
fact, they're making extra dosages right now. They're going door to door in the Europe and US vaccinating people.
yeah, exactly. No, and if Russia tomorrow says it's a good day, no, it's a fucking bad day. Why would you say that?
Oh my god, that's too funny. Okay, anything else coronavirus related on your mind that you would like to talk about?
UK is stepping. UK has banned quite a few people from coming in from Europe, and I think they just added France to the list, and France is retaliating by banning the British. So I think there was no need for Brexit. Like Corona sorted it out.
Hey, Brexit is that still a thing?
What do you mean? It's still well, it's still happening. Yes.
I forgot about it.
It's a big thing. Yes.
But no, but you
Yeah.
can't find any news about Brexit or terrorism on TV right now to save your life.
Yeah, it's gone to the. Well, I think they still do the negotiations. You hear once in a while with UK, but the Corona thing has obviously taken the front seat.
Yeah, and other
But
actual things that happen
yes,
in the world
I
that you
thought
have to cover.
that move forward.
Yeah.
But no, it's quite interesting that the whole EU is basically. I mean, there was a big deal about the whole EU fund, the frugal states of Northern Europe didn't want to give as much money to Italians and Spanish people. It's just the whole situation. Corona has caused the political situation to really, I don't know. It feels like it's gone full on. Uh, not that it wasn't before, but the state of nature of hubs. It feels like everybody's just looking out for themselves now completely. Nobody gives a shit.
Sure. I mean, 100%. I mean,
I mean, it's
just the
always
way.
like that. But
Yeah. No, I mean, definitely. I mean, what was
yeah,
that? This one treatment that the US bought 80% of it for like
yeah.
for the next 3 months. So, I mean, right now, yeah. I mean, everybody's looking after themselves.
No, yeah, it's been funny things going around. But it seems though, I feel like recent weeks the whole corona, it's less covered in the, like, they don't talk about the second peak as much. Everybody seems to have a bit chilled out. I don't know.
I mean, yeah, but it's funny how you mentioned the second peak and stuff. Now that you hear about it, it seems like, I mean, the first peak isn't even over, so.
It's just, I think it was all like a very journalistic way of, looking at things first peak, second peak. What do you mean? Like, it's disease is here. Anyways, I really wasn't a big fan of the coverage as a whole. I don't know. What did you think of the coverage as a whole?
There are so many stages of it now that I can't even. I think at some parts, like in all countries, like things got so serious that the coverage got decent, that like they actually started saying what people had to do, what had to be done and stuff. But before things became serious, I mean, the coverage was just all over the place and just bullshit. But I think once it got serious, I think in some places at least, it was some decent information coming out. It just depends what they were talking about, what part of it. But just some parts of it became too serious for it to be the usual media spin.
I I just think it was from very beginning done in a very panicky way, and until now, and represented as the end of the world situation. And I didn't like that, and I don't like that. I mean, a lot of people have died. I don't want to minimize the pain it has caused, the problems it has caused, but at the same time, I don't think by panicking and just running around like headless chickens, we can sort problems out.
Yeah, but I mean, just to be fair, I think at first there was just also a lot of genuine uncertainty
Sure, no, fair, no, that's definitely fair enough. Yeah.
that contributed.
But I guess yeah, that's it. So maybe it's time to move on to the last story. So
Yeah,
what's
this
the? I've been looking forward to this one for a while.
maybe I said too much. Maybe it's not going to be that funny, but it's
All
just
right,
a funny story, and it's called 10 Bad Habits. Okay, it's called 10 Bad Habits of Lazy People. So
all right.
from the headline, do you already picture what kind of article this is?
So first of all, I love how it immediately starts with the insult that lazy. It's just already give you one habit.
Listen,
You're
this
fucking.
article is full of insults. Okay, I mean, it's one of these, I guess, motivational how to be entrepreneur, what entrepreneurs do, but from the other side. But
Oh,
this
from
one,
like
so I guess it's
is
not
it
what
love?
entrepreneurs do, it's what people who aren't entrepreneurs do.
All right.
So, I mean, 10 bad
Yeah.
habits of lazy people.
Yeah,
And
102 things done by
yeah.
unsuccessful homeless people.
And it's featured in the Business Insider. So, it's
Really?
about, yeah.
Yeah, that's
So it's
disappointing.
about, waking up at 4 a.m. and, having a coffee then and then working really hard and becoming a billionaire or a millionaire or I don't know what. At
So,
least,
so what are the bad habits? Come
so,
on, tell me.
but this article, they take it too far. Just listen to some of these, okay? So the 10 bad habits, okay?
Definitely link that below.
Okay, for sure. So the first one, they're always distracted. So lazy and bad habits of lazy people, they're always distracted.
So being distracted is a habit then. All right.
Yeah, okay, that's of lazy people. It's okay, so you're never going to be successful if you're always distracted. They only talk the talk. I mean, of course, they don't do anything. The next one, they spend time with losers.
How very specific and well defined.
That's so true.
Exactly. Like, is Trump considered a winner or loser?
This one, it just gets childish. I mean, the first one, when I read it right now, like, they get distracted easily. It's like, okay,
That's
they
not
just
a great
get
habit.
funnier and funnier. They spend time with losers. The fourth one, they hate everything. I don't know where the hell they got that. There's okay, that's more like a maybe pessimistic people, but
Yeah, like, quite a lot of lazy people that are lovey-dovey and into free love.
Exactly. Okay, next one. They procrastinate, of course. I mean, that's just
Isn't that laziness?
Yeah, that's just the standard one you have to throw in there,
Oh, but that's repeating yourself.
I know,
So
I know.
Lazy people don't do a lot.
Yeah, because they procrastinate. While hanging out with losers. They don't listen to others.
They what?
They don't listen to others.
Okay, alright.
Okay. Guess what number 7? What number 7 is?
I don't know.
They're lazy.
Wait. They sleep a lot?
They're lazy.
Huh?
They're lazy.
What
So a bad habit of lazy people is the fact that they're lazy.
Thanks for that.
I'm
yeah,
learning
that's
so much
really clarifying
from this article. I mean, it's so insightful.
Do they have like a paragraph explaining each?
Yeah, and nothing like points. Honestly, I read them. They're like one or two small paragraphs. Not one of them point to, sometimes they okay, let me read you the full headline. Actually, it's more than 10 bad habits of lazy people. 10 bad habits of lazy and unlikable people that you should avoid if you want to be successful.
Oh, wow.
So I think they're also trying to hit some
keywords.
But none of their paragraphs brought anything to it. Okay, there's two more left. Bear with me.
Of course.
Okay, so number 8, they don't learn. I mean, it's just a given. And then, wait, oh no. I should have kept the article differently. Sorry, it's in my phone. This wasn't the smartest way. Okay, number 9 and 10. They're not nice. So on top of that, they're not nice. Somehow people think it's cool to be a jerk. Honestly, it's way cooler to be nice. That's one of the paragraphs.
I don't see how that plays a role in laziness, but okay.
And last and but not least, they are quitters. So as long as you can address these 10 fundamental points, you might do well in life. I love how they stopped at 10. They could have continued. Number 11, they're not rude. Number 12, they're not women beaters.
No, I just love the articles that, the way to get ahead in life is to get ahead in life. Sherlock, thank you.
This one was worse than the usual ones that you see.
This was the author on this one, or the authors, I think, the copywriter was, he was hangover, it was raining outside, he was very bored.
There's no shame in the things that they're listing, Number 13, they're murderers.
Half of it is just basically repeating that don't be lazy. So I expected one of them to be don't be unlikable. But I think we should the copywriter wanted some quick cash and there was some. This is probably some advert, like native ad or something. There's probably some link in there. I can't believe somebody wrote that.
No. Telling you, I swear to God, it's an article. Does it have an author?
Probably as a, yeah, well, it has an author,
Yeah.
but I
Oh, it's
bother
written. Okay, it's written by Darius Foruz, and he has a website.
again, I'm not an author, but
Yeah. So
yeah.
I mean, it's probably that they
Thank
help.
you for, thank you,
But
Darius.
yeah, so I mean, just start by being nice.
Oh, nice synergy, by the way. Persian name. Yes.
But
Yeah.
yeah, so Sam, I think that's it for our first episode of Spar and Brawl. We did a bit of sparring. I don't think things
Not so
got
much
that
brawling.
serious, but it was
No.
some light stuff for the first episode, I think.
Hopefully, when coronavirus is over and we can have a studio like, then we can brawl.
Yeah,
But
we can properly get
yeah.
into a ring and make
You have
this
to find
happen.
issues you're passionate about, like really passionate. Yeah.
But yeah, so we're gonna try to get out this podcast every single Friday. So thank you for watching us, and I'm Cam, and this is my co-host Sam, and we'll speak to you all next time.
It was great talking to you all. Take care.